With Escoffier being Everknight's best support and Farina being basically a must-have too, it's clear that... Wait, who the hell is writing this? I told the internet not let the monkey bots write the script! Hello everyone, it's me, you, and jokes aside, I want to use today to cover a topic that's been on my mind for a little while. Now, the Genshin thing wasn't just a throwaway line. If you've been keeping up with Genshin, then you'll know that Skirk, Flint, and Nefer are and will be very strong DPSs. But one thing they have in common is that they all want their dedicated supports. And if you don't have them, well, your performance goes down. A lot. The thing is, that's one more character you gotta pick up, which means more primos you gotta spend. Nowadays, it feels like we're starting to see the same pattern in Star Rail, where we get a DPS and they need their dedicated supports to perform well. This, along with some other stuff, makes the game feel less free-to-play friendly. So today, I want to talk about whether or not Star Rail is actually becoming less free-to-play friendly, and figure out what's causing it or if it's even happening at all. Just want to say though, there's many points, so you may want to watch the end if you want an accurate conclusion. With that said, let's get right into it. Now we must first define what free-to-play friendly is. There is one take which would strictly involve free stuff such as Herda and event light codes, and also the free units we get. But those are kind of freebies. The free-to-play I want to talk about is the slightly less accessible option, that being 4 stars, aka the not premium options. 4 stars are generally the cheaper options and stand in for 5 stars, filling in the gaps until you can upgrade. The thing is, we don't really have 4 stars, or more accurately, it's been ages since our last one, and that's where the first issue lies. Now, back when follow-up was meta near 2.5 with the introduction of Fei Xiao, if you didn't have Topaz, then you were fine as you have Moza and Hunt March, which were good and low-cost replacements. But ever since Amphorius, there's been no new 4 stars. If you want to play the new Remembrance comps, 5 stars. Want to try HP comps? 5 stars. Revisit Dot? 5 stars. You get the point. As such, I think it's safe to say that Amphorius, in regards to 4-star options, has been getting less free-to-play friendly. Now, of course, if Hoyo were to suddenly introduce a lot of 4 stars back-to-back that fill different roles in different teams, then this issue would be alleviated. But as of now, it's not the case. And that brings me to my second point. Instead of focusing on 4 stars, let's look at 5 stars instead. As you know, a unit will always need proper supports to perform well. It is Honkai's support rail for a reason. But not all units are created equal when it comes to how much support they actually need. Some units can use any type of support and be just fine. For example, just throw whatever you have for Jinyuan and Anaxa and it'd probably work. However, for other units, they're much more niche, where they essentially require a specific support to function well. Or even the other way around for someone like Seredra. So the next way I want to talk about free-to-play friendliness is looking at how versatile or restrictive these new units are. This is because, if a unit is restrictive, that would mean a player would have to pull the unit and the 5-star support, which as I mentioned in the start, hurts the piggy bank. So I want to analyze our past and present DPSs to see if our modern units are less free-to-play friendly than the past. Now, this chart I'm about to show you simply looks at whether or not you need a particular 5-star support. The idea is that you need them to even reach your potential, where your kits are basically intertwined. So let's take a look at my chart. For those who aren't colored in, are people who can basically use any support, primarily the meta-relevant ones. Now, while Castris would love Hyacine and Tribi, she does not need them to function. Even Jingliu and Mighty can use 8 out of the 10 meta supports, even while being HP scalers. So if those guys are this flexible, then it shows you that the other DPSs are definitely more flexible. Just to reiterate though, a massive damage increase is not the same as needing them to function. Next are the characters in yellow, who greatly benefit from their chosen support. But they're not mandatory if you're willing to go that extra mile. Even for someone like Imbiber Lune and Archer, they don't need Sparkle if you're willing to do some funny business. And lastly, those in the red. Here we have characters who cannot function by themselves and will need premium supports to be good. And as expected, we have Dot and Break, who due to their mechanics need specialized supports and DPSs. Now, even someone like Evernight can kind of function outside of remembrance themes, with them not even being necessary if you have E2. Now, when looking at support, almost every single character is extremely versatile, with them of course preferring their own niches though. Emporia supports for the most part, while being versatile, have had 2 new additions which had not been. These of course will be Surejo, who can only be fully utilized by 2 DPSs at the moment, and Cyrene, who will be the most restrictive of them all. With there only being 12 Chrysos heirs and likely none coming after, I truly wonder how she'll age, but of course that'll be for a separate video. Now, when looking at the entire thing holistically, I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty shocked with the results. It really felt like there's been an increase in characters that need others to function well. Outside the beginning of the game, where there wasn't really any niches yet, the amount of niche has remained relatively the same after Panaconi. For the most part, units generally can function by themselves, unless they have a particular niche like Dot, Break, or now Cyrene. So unlike Genshin's Escoffier and Llama, Star Rail as of now, for most units, are not quote-unquote locked behind other units, which is honestly pretty surprising. Okay, we've now made it halfway through the video, and so far the conclusions drawn are 1. We are lacking 4 stars, which is making the game less free-to-play friendly. 2. DPSs generally aren't locked behind another unit, which means that if Star Rail is becoming less free-to-play friendly, this isn't the reason why. And 3. Supports outside of a few exceptions are pretty versatile. But not gonna lie, the second conclusion, while being objectively correct, still doesn't feel right. It feels like having Castris, if I skipped out on Hyacine, then I really messed up. And if I don't pick up Evernight now, then it's also gonna be a costly mistake. But again, I don't need them to function well. Haha, you see, that's where the real problem lies. And you're not tripping if you feel that way, because you will get shit on if you don't pull these technically non-mandatory supports. So what the hell is going on? Well, I'll give you 3 seconds to take a guess. Okay, time's up. Now, the answer is... Svarog! It's in the thumbnail, guys. Come on, there was a super obvious hint. Okay, but jokes aside, it's actually enemy inflation. Yes, everything else mentioned so far quite literally pales in comparison when it comes to what impacts a game free-to-play friendliness. Now, power creep and HP or enemy inflation goes hand in hand, but are 2 completely separate things. We, however, will focus specifically on enemy inflation, where the enemy simply gets more HP and hits harder. So why is this the case? Well, while you don't need best-in-slot supports to function, you kinda need best-in-slot supports to win. At the moment, the enemy HP is at a point where if you're not using meta, it's either gonna be very difficult to win or quite literally impossible. While you can get away with low costs using OP DPSs, what happens when enemies start having even more HP? Think about our 2.x meta. Back when we thought Acheron and Fei Xiao were going to be the pinnacle of damage, they were enough to shred through content with less support. But now, with the rising HP values, even those kinds of units start looking like they need their best-in-class supports to just keep up. The bar for what counts as viable damage keeps getting higher, and that's what slowly pushes players toward needing both DPSs and their supports. Not because their kits demand it, but because the content does. Let's look at this damage chart that I found, and of course just take it with a grain of salt. But as you can see, the Castris comp kinda blows everything out of the water. So what happens when this becomes the new baseline? Well, everything under it just becomes unviable, basically forcing players to pull new units again to even stand a chance. Now, rather than harping on this point, as I think it's pretty self-explanatory, let's talk about Hyacine, the current best unit in the game. Before Anomaly Arbitration and 3.6, I personally judged a sustain purely on what utility and damage increase they provided for a team. Because, well, enemies didn't do enough damage to really care. Gallagher, Huohuo, amazing units. But now, we have an MOC where Japar does 2k a hit, or 4k a slam, or Night 3 which 100 to zeros you because they can. Hyacine at the moment isn't a must pull for your account because she adds so much value for your teams. It's because she's quite literally one of the few units that can keep you alive, if not the only one. For multi-DPS comps like Dot or Thurda, I feel really bad because you literally get one shot by everything. 2 or 3 units with 3k HP and 900 defense? Yeah, you're not really surviving. So to conclude this part, the takeaway would be that what makes the game less free-to-play friendly isn't the new units or power creep. It almost always comes down to the enemies. Their HP and damage is what creates the need for those stronger units in the first place. If we still had the 1.x HP levels on the MOC enemies, then every unit from tier 0 down to tier 5 would be OP, because in the end, everything is relative. Now, because the game is getting even more difficult, players are pushed into relying on the most meta stuff just to keep pace. That's why people are starting to worry and say things like, if I skip Trippy, Shredra, and Cyrene, am I just screwing myself over to getting power grabbed? So yeah, with the big point out of the way, I just have one more concept to go over. Enemy niche. Do you need certain units to succeed? While we talked about how some units are teammate locked, we now have enemies that are team locked. Is Stario becoming like Genshin's Stygian Onslaught, where we need our llamas or Scofiers to even beat it? Well, for modes like MOC and Pure Fiction, I can confidently say no. These modes have been the most fair of the bunch, with it often just being a DPS check, and now sustained for MOC. While it has had certain enemies like Nicodor and Flame Reaver being an AoE check, it isn't really restrictive, although it of course favors some individuals. So what about Apocalyptic Shadow? I'd also say no, although slightly less. For the most part, this game mode has always been focused on the toughness bar, so units like Ruame were greatly favored. However, every boss has their own unique mechanics on how to break them, with most archetypes being able to at least attempt it. For the Bug, Aventurine, and Flame Reaver, you just have to kill the ads, regardless of the method. For Kafka, Fantalia, and Doomsday, you have to kill the 2 guys on the side and then focus on the toughness. As you can see, it's pretty fair. Now, even with Polix, she is quite literally the easiest boss we've had in a while, with it just being a DPS and healer check. You quite literally cannot die with a healer, so it's really up to your damage. So it's because of this, while it favors certain individuals based on the boss, similar to how Pure Fiction favors AoE units, enemy niche is not that big of an issue. So that just leads to anomaly arbitration. Now this one's pretty obvious, right? It's also no. As of now, it's actually less restrictive than even Apocalyptic Shadow, which is an insane statement, right? Well, not really, and it's pretty easy to prove too. For our first anomaly arbitration, we have a break favored, dot favored, and a DPS check for the knight, with Lygus being a sustain and damage check. Every single one of these is brute forceable, with only the second knight being potentially niche locked, and this is strictly due to the modifier, which shafts everything but 2 playstyles. But this is just one set of enemies, it doesn't really tell us how the mode is. Well, that's why we can look at the next one. So, does this trend hold up into the future? Well, for our next one, our knights will be a damage check, a sustain check, and a break check, but brute forceable like the last one. And the boss, Aquila, is a weakly boss-styled enemy, which is just a damage check and sustain check, so nothing out of the ordinary. Now, while this of course isn't enough to predict the future and know if they'll make the enemies more niche locked ahead, we can at least for now say it isn't. And yeah, that's all the points I've had. So it's time for a proper conclusion. I would say that currently, Stario is not that free-to-play friendly. This would in one case be due to the lack of 4 stars, as well as basically needing 5 stars to make any new teams. And while this is a factor, the true culprit behind it all will be enemy inflation. There currently isn't really an issue where units need a particular unit to function, of course outside a select few, with the reason why it feels that way of course being HP inflation. Enemies at the moment thankfully aren't niche locked like Stygian Onslaught in Genshin, because oh boy, that mode sucks balls. Now, of course, I can't just be pointing out all these issues without providing answers because, well, that wouldn't really be too helpful. So of the things I wish to see or have Hoyo do, 1. Just add more 4 stars please, or buff older ones to fit into new niches. 2. Just slow down with the enemy inflation, okay? While it's nice having challenging stuff, it's also a double-edged sword, making older things just not viable. And 3. Just keep the enemy design smart. I think Nikador, Lygus, and Sleepy are really fun and well-designed bosses. It's fine favoriting a playstyle, just make sure it's not required. Let us brute force it and allow us to get away with vertically investing, and at the same time, reward us for playing along and horizontally investing. That way, everyone wins. Just make it so you don't punish everyone for not playing along, because that seriously sucks balls. Looking at you, Stygian Onslaught. Okay, and that's everything. I hope this video has been pretty educational and open your mind to a different perspective. My next video will be about Cyrene and her teams, because my last video just focused on what she did and her buffs, not whether or not the performance is good with the different Chrysosairs. So I'll probably post that video sometime at version 3, which kinda sucks because that's a week away from now. So yeah, no new videos until then. But besides that, thank you for watching and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.